Hey everyone, thanks for joining. I have a really exciting guest for you today. It's someone who I met at a real estate event, and I actually admired because what she did is she actually wrote a book, What Would Water Do? And it jumped right to the front of my reading list. And I've had it about a week now and already devoured it. So you'll see I have a bunch of questions for her. So how you doing today, Brooke?
I'm very good. Thank you for asking, Michael.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun, but this is a real estate show. So,
Yep.
you make reference in the book about your husband and you being real estate entrepreneurs. So why don't we really break down for them what that means?
Sure. Yep. So we started in earnest, I'd say about 5.5 years ago when the youngest was born and when I went on maternity leave, which gave him plenty of time to spend his whole time on it. I do have a day job that keeps me pretty much busy. But before that, we had become accidental landlords when a townhouse that we ended up moving into a bigger house as we got our family started, and so we were able to get a long-term lease in that townhouse. This is up in Northern Virginia, and lucky there, they caused very little problem. They were very undemanding. The rent always showed up. I mean, it was like, oh, this is easy. Let's do this again. So scroll forward, and by the way, we couldn't sell that house because it was in the reception anyway. So we're like, oh, may as well rent it out. So scroll forward to the third child, and my husband really dove into let's make this a full-time gig. And so just as you did, we started one rental at a time, and it's all been single families for the most part. And some MLS, really going through the entire gamut of how do you find the leads, how do you know it's a good deal. I know you like to bake in enough margin that it's not too thin, try to avoid the alligators and whatnot. And so that's really been the strategy we've been trying to do. A lot of it is really about make sure you've got plenty of margin so that when you do screw up, and you will, especially in the early days, that you can recover from it and one mess up doesn't just completely crash the whole enterprise. So started that in earnest to say, hey, let's build a portfolio, like I said, about 5.5 years ago. It started out slow, as you're getting your toe in the water, and at first you're like, let's do one a year. That sounds great. And my husband was like, I'm going to do one a month. And I'm like,
Ah,
and then it became, well, how about one a week? And I'm like, oh,
wow.
so I don't know that we're quite there yet, but sometimes it feels like we are. Yeah. So I would say there's been an interesting evolution. I'd say 3 years ago was really the year of systems. 2 years ago was very much the year of short-term rentals and really trying to figure that out. This year has already been a lot of the year of discipline. Okay, like what do you want to cull out of the portfolio, and where do you just get smarter?
Yeah.
It's been good. It's been really good for us.
Yeah. And again, it's his full-time job now.
Oh yes, and I think he loves it most of the time.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. We could probably do a show with both of you on it sometime, but I want to make sure we talk about your book because, again, What Would Water Do? I read it. I actually marked up all kinds of pages. So yeah,
Awesome.
we could do. Why don't you talk about why the book first as I get ready to pull out the first sort of area to talk about?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I do have a corporate job still. I am hoping to follow in your footsteps soon and fire myself. But the one of the things I just love is helping others as they develop in their journey. And so I do a lot of coaching and mentoring. I have teams. It's been anywhere from one person to I had a 1,000-person call center reporting to me at one point in time. But so I have a lot of people I work with, and I love helping figure out, like, hey, what are you stumbling on? What do you need help with? What's standing in your way? And as I talk to somebody, they'd say, oh, my problem is this, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm like, oh, either, hey, I have a book that you should read, or let me tell you this story about blah, blah, blah. And I found that I was repeating myself again and again. And people are like, wow, that's so helpful. You should write a book. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And finally, I'm like, oh, well, why don't I write a book? And so that's really where it started. I would say this is all the advice I wish I had to give to my younger self, So that's where it started, and that's where we're at.
Well, yeah, as you'll see with the questions, there is so much in this book. I'm in my mid 40s now that I wish I would have really internalized or understood
Mhm.
much, much earlier. So I hope a lot of people go and get this regardless of where they are. And to jump right in, right on page 5, right? It's my first question for you. I wanted you to sort of talk about your, dare and kind of how you break that down and why that's kind of important to discuss
Yeah.
and think about.
Okay. So, question's great. Who's your reader? I'm like, well, I don't know. Yeah, I said, well, okay, hold on. Actually, I do know, and it's really, I think people get stuck for a handful of reasons. And actually its working title was Unstuck until I saw there were a bunch of other Unstucks on Amazon. I'm like, oh, I need to do a different name. But I'm like, okay, well, why do people get stuck? Well, I think a lot of folks get stuck, and I have in my past. You just don't know what you want to do. Like, you don't know where you're going. And so you go day by day and life goes on. But if you don't know where you're going, you don't really know how to go there faster or better or stronger. So the first piece of it, and then the next two, attitude and resources, are, all right, I know where I want to go, but I don't know how. I can't, I don't have the time. I don't have the money. I don't know how to do it. No one can help me. Sometimes woe is me, and so it's really like, I know what I want to do, but I have no idea how to go about doing it. And so we talk a lot about both the attitude as well as the resources and how to find them either within or externally. And then lastly, and I know you've talked about this with Liz on a recent podcast, you got to take action, right? And so it's about execution. So it's like, okay, I know where I want to go, and I've got all my stuff, but like, either I'm intimidated, or I don't know how to take that first step, or it seems too daunting. And so we talk about how to start breaking big problems into little problems and set micro goals, even in one baby step at a time.
Yeah, and
So,
I found that whole topic, simple in its elegance, but so impactful when you
yeah,
can relate, what was going on in those different steps to really how you can unpack the situation and move forward. I thought that was really well done.
thank you.
Yeah, the next thing, I so rarely read something that I immediately put the book down and post on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it. I did give you credit. It's TSA Steve. Right?
Oh, I love TSA Steve.
And that interaction, and most importantly, what he said to you. So set it up for us, right? You're a busy
Sure.
professional. You're going through the airport. You go,
Yep.
we do it. I've done it, right? You sit there, you try to be polite, but not too polite because you don't want to get red flagged and all that stuff. You hand your ticket, your license to Steve, and what happens?
Yeah, so totally true story. I was heading home. I was on a trip and I was heading home, and it was in Seattle Tacoma Airport. And I finally get up to the guy who's taking all the paperwork, and I'm like, here you go. Hi, how are you? And he's like, I'm excellent, but I'm trying to get better. And I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. I'm like, wait, what? What did you say? And he was already with someone else, so I didn't stop and ask him about it. But I'm like, wait, like, I love the attitude, and so he's, first of all, it's a great positive attitude, right? And second of all, there's a humor to it, that kind of makes you pause, because normally when someone says, how are you? You're just expecting fine. And you don't want the litany of what's wrong. It's not really a conversation starter normally, but then just the idea of continual improvement, and saying like, I'm really good. And I want to get better, versus everything's awful and it has to get better, but more, no, I'm good and getting better. Like, I just love it. It just really resonated for me.
I read that, and the pause was equally dramatic to me. At least that's how I read it. Like, I'm excellent, because, occasionally you'll hear people that are excellent, right? They're having a good day or whatever it is. Then there's this pause, and like, I'm gone, right? I'm already walking by, like, yeah, great, good. I'm having great, good for you. And then he goes, I'm trying to get better. I'm like, whoa, that was pretty powerful. So I put the book down. I posted the quote and gave you all the credit in the world. I just thought that was such a powerful interaction.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
It really has stuck with me, and I've told a lot of people about it.
As you should. I mean, that's awesome. I think the chapter that probably resonates with most of the viewers, probably on my channel, right, where they have a full-time job, they feel like they have commitments, they see this vision of financial freedom or retirement as this thing so far, far away. And it's your chapter 7. You call it Shackles and Obligations.
Yep.
And, we just got to unpack that a little bit. So talk about that and sort of how you walk through that chapter.
Sure. So, I think A lot of times there's always an excuse, and sometimes they're extremely valid excuses, and it could be that you're the sole breadwinner, or that you have to care for somebody, either the very little ones or the very old ones or a disabled loved one or whatever. And like, you'd love to go do all these things and follow your dreams and go be a hiker in the Brazilian rainforests and do all this amazing stuff, right? And you're like, yeah, that sounds great for you. I got kids, I got mortgage, I got this, I got that, I got all these other things. And so, it's a combination really in my mind of two pieces when I think about those. One is, well, maybe three, excuse me. One is that there's a time and a place for I believe everything, right? And so sometimes it's about, now is not the season. I have very little kids and blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. Enjoy that moment while planning for the whatever it is that you dream to do. And, maybe you want to go skydiving. I would recommend wait till they're out of the house. So if something goes wrong, like at least on the road, right, or whatever, right? So it doesn't mean you can't do it. Maybe you just can't do it right now, I think another piece of it is about how do you, if you can't go somewhere, how do you kind of take that mind trip in your head, find a book, find a person. My friend Cindy always talks about, instead of checking out a book, check out a person, and make it a human library and ask them their story and learn about them and whatever. I think there's a third piece as well, which is sometimes those shackles and obligations, there actually is a way around it. And that's one of the many ways it touches on the title of the book, what would water do, right? It's anytime there's an obstacle and you think about water, just cruising down the riverbed or whatnot, it runs into rocks and logs and debris and all the time. But it doesn't say, oh, here's a rock, I just got to stop forever. It may swirl a little while, but it doesn't stop forever, and it never goes, it just turns around and goes back home. It finds a way forward. It goes over, it goes under, it goes around it, maybe it goes through it, maybe it takes the debris with it, and just keeps it on its way. And so the question is really, really look hard at what those shackles and those obligations are. Are you really stuck? Like, can you really not go anywhere or do anything or start improving yourself? Like, maybe there's something you want to do. Well, can you learn about it while you're kind of stuck? Can you educate yourself? Like, what can you do? Mm-hmm. Even if you can't do everything you want immediately, what can you do now to start to, make that path forward for when the time is right?
Yeah, and your, I'll call it picture, for lack of a better term, on 92 was just that. What would water do, right? The picture of a couple standing on the riverbank looking at the rocks, and yeah, water does what it does, and that's
what it does.
Yeah, that if you sort of sit back and realize that your life is that, and stuff is going to get in the way and may feel like an impediment. If you turn that analogy, you use the analogy of water in a river, it's eye-opening, right? It doesn't stop. It doesn't go backwards, right?
Yeah.
It finds a way forward, right? That was pretty powerful. So I'm glad you brought that up.
It's very true. And the other thing to remember on rocks is that generally they're not there despite the water. That's just where they are.
Yeah.
They live there, like, okay, let's go around it then. Like, you don't have to fight the rock. Just find a way around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we all have our own rocks. Everybody's rocks are a little different. They're shaped differently. They're bigger, they're smaller, there's more, there's less. We all have rocks and debris and other stuff.
That's right.
Which was pretty cool. Another analogy, because again, I like stories, was when you related to the fact that we all juggle a lot of balls. And then you went to the next step and said, some of those are crystal and some of them are rubber. I'm like, gosh, darn it, she did it again. I'm like, yeah, we're all busy. We're all juggling these things. But you know what? If we drop some, a couple of them are going to bounce back. And then there's others that if you drop, they shatter into a gazillion pieces, never to come back. And I'm like, oh, we got to talk about that one. Because that's yeah. I don't know, at least I will admit to never really focusing on the crystal balls, right? The ones that will shatter if you drop. That's just eye-opening, I thought. So good job. Yeah. And let's talk about those.
Sure. I did borrow that analogy. I read it in some romance book years ago. I was on a plane, one of my many travels. I want to say it was like a Nicholas Sparks book or something like that. And it was some lady at the beginning was basically, juggling too many balls and whatever. And they were talking about that. And I'm like, wow. Because it also really hit me then. And I'm like, what is this? Just some random novel that like really profound truth, right?
Yeah.
But if you think about it, like, let's say that you mess something up or you just don't do something. The question is, how critical is that? And, is it you just have to clean up a mess, in which case, okay, like maybe it's easier to clean up the mess than then try not to have the mess happen in the first place. Like, okay. But if you fundamentally crush a person that you care deeply about, or if you do something that drastically affects your health or your longevity, or, something that not everything can be fixed. Modern medicine is amazing, but people die all the time.
Yeah.
And, and so just making sure, what are you doing that's helping your health? Like, this is on top of my mind because I feel like I've let it drift a little. I need to get back in line. I need to get my discipline back, So whether it's your health, whether it's your relationships, I think about that with my kids, everyone's always too busy, but I'm like, at some point they won't want me around anymore. So like,
yes, that is true.
Last night, the girls and I played War and Go Fish and Connect Four for a while. And like, it was great. Is that really what I love doing? No, I mean, not really. I'd rather play poker or whatever else. But like, it was the time with them and they loved it. I'm like, okay, like that's what matters, right? It's that we're spending the time together. So, things at work, is it a deadline? How negotiable or non-negotiable is it? If it's a deal, okay, let's say it falls through. Well, okay, maybe it wasn't meant to happen. Maybe it's the best deal ever and you need to double down. So think about what are the potential issues? Is it a compliance thing? My husband and I come from a little bit more of a conservative background. I work in banking. It's all about, rules and regulations and thou shalt follow every rule. And I'm like, everything. It's like, but you're not allowed to do that. And, this, that. And he's like, okay, well, we're trying to do everything right. Like, we are trying so hard to build everything right so that you can build and grow a big portfolio, a big business. And you can't be skating on the edge if you're doing something big, right? So when we started small, that was one of our guiding principles, is do everything as right as we can so that, we're as clean as possible. You're going to mess up. Like, you're going to mess up. But as you're learning, like, do everything as right as you can so that when things are big, you don't go kick yourself from when you were doing not good things when you're small. So coming from banking and being more conservative, I'm like, well, we got to do this. We got to do that. And he's like, okay, calm down. Like, what happens if we don't? Like, not that we don't want to, but what if you don't get this filing in time, or you don't submit this paperwork in time? Like, what's the worst? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, $50 fine. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, that's a ball you can drop because you can recover from it easily. Yeah. Now if you do something terrible and somebody gets terribly hurt on a construction site or whatever, and it's total negligence, that's a problem. Like, if someone gets really hurt, that's not just pay a $50 fine. Like, that is their livelihood, their life. Like, you got to balance what matters and what, even if it matters, it's recoverable from. And so that's really the intention behind the idea of the crystal balls and the rubber balls and those.
Yeah. And again, it's so true. I mean, no matter where you are in your life, if you're a, college student, you're, 70 years old and collecting Social Security, we all still have those balls, some more fragile than the others, and some that will just come back to you. So, this book is riddled with examples that just make you think and step back and look at your life. So, again, What Would Water Do is a huge recommendation on my part.
Yeah, thank you.
The last thing I want to talk about, the last thing I've noted, because, there's so many things we could talk about, was the one that's probably most important to most people these days in this world of screens and, TV shows and Netflix and all YouTube and all this stuff, is time wasters or time thieves. Talk about that and really how people can put those in check and probably just even recognize them first off and then put them in check.
Sure. Yeah. So wasting time. So time is really, honestly, one of our absolute most precious commodities, because you can't make more. Like, you can make more money. If you get a little bit out of shape, you can always get yourself back into shape, hopefully, but you can't make more time. And so, for me, it's really, how do you juggle all these things? As I mentioned, I have a full-time corporate job, 3 kids. I just finished writing this book. I've started noodling on a second one. I just got my realtor's license as well. And by the way, just trying to be a human being, and, thus now it's time to work on the health again. Okay. But they're only 24 hours in the day, no matter how you slice it. And you have the same 24 hours I have as Mother Teresa or Gandhi or President of the United States, whoever, right? It's the same 24 hours. And so, a lot of times people say, oh, I just don't have the time. I'm like, well, you have the time. The question is, how do you choose to use the time? And so one of the things I like to do is try to figure out, where do I have time hidden in plain sight? And so things like commuting, or going to the sports practices, or, waiting in line, or whatever the case may be. And so the question is, what can you do with that time to multi-purpose it without sacrificing whatever the thing is? So if you're driving, make sure you can pay attention to the road, but that's also a great time to listen to a podcast, or something of education that you care about, that you're trying to learn more about, or just relax if that's really what you need to do. But figure out, how can I use that time? Quite honestly, a lot of that book was either written or edited sitting on the floor of the YMCA while my kids either did basketball practice, or when I was at the soccer field on the sidelines, or at the kids' swim lessons, because yes, I like to keep it on them, but honestly, they're paying no attention to me, and whether or not I'm paying attention to them, and I have to be there because they're too young to drive themselves. But it's things like, how can you reclaim that time that otherwise would be lost? I think those are important. I think screen time is always something to look at. I barely watch any TV. That's just my choice. It's not something I really do a lot. I have a few shows, but I'll maybe binge once every 3 months and then forget about it for a few months. My little demons, once I get on Facebook, I kind of get sucked into the void, and I have to remind myself to put it down and don't let myself take it to my bedroom, which I do more often than I want to. And then Rich elbows me and he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, sorry. It's not sorry to him, it's sorry to me, right? And so it's really, how do you figure out those screens that are killing you, the waste, where's the waste, and try to figure out where you can get rid of that waste. I think you spoke about the idea of return on time.
I did.
When I saw you speak at Jen Ingersoll's event, and I'm like, wow, that's a really good metric. Because again, you can't make more. You can make more money to invest, but you can't make more time to invest. And so I thought that was an amazing metric.
Yeah, and again, the return on time came to me again, just like you, right? Observing people, and a lot of the professionals that I work with, they make a very nice W-2, but their times, they have such slivers of time available, right? So it's like, what can you get for return on time, right? Could you get do you really want to manage an apartment building of all Section 8 tenants when you have 15 minutes a week you can spare? The answer is no.
Right.
I don't care what the cash flow is. The answer is no, right?
Right.
Certainly self-managed. The answer is no. Or do you want a fully remodeled turnkey property that's, in the middle of the market? Yeah, sure. You may pay a little bit more, but your return on time is exponentially more valuable, right? You probably don't look at that for a year.
Yeah.
So that's what it came for me.
Yeah. I know you like to talk about, make sure your deals have room for that 8 to 10% for property management, right?
Exactly. I don't want to deal with that stuff. I still don't want to deal with that. I don't have a job. I don't want to do that. Oh, this has been a lot of fun. This, again, thank you for this book. I so rarely pick one up and read it cover to cover without, throwing in another book, but this is one I read. And I'm so glad, you were able to do this. Any last words you want to say about this book, or anything in general before we wrap it up?
I would just encourage folks, it's on Amazon, both in Kindle and paperback formats. I would hope it could help pretty much anybody. Again, I wrote it for about 20-year-old self, but I've had some folks in their 60s really just going on about how they enjoyed this or that part and how that was helpful to them, even at that stage in their life. And so I guess it's a little bit more ubiquitous than I thought it might be. So that's exciting. I would encourage everyone, give it a look. I think it's good for real estate. I think it's good for living life in general. And anyone who wants to find out a little bit more about me, I'm on Facebook. So facebook.com/Brooke, Lennon author, AUTHOR. And you can see my little snippets there as well if you're curious.
Yeah, very good. And people, what you will see in about 10 minutes, so certainly by the time this video is uploaded, you will see my Amazon feedback, which will be a 5-star with a couple of references to what you just heard here. So thank you very much, Brooke. And I think you're going off to pick up your kids at karate practice or some kind of practice. So thank you for squeezing us in.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
You got it. Take care.